Today we're making reproduction woodwork for our house. Our house is circa 1870, and believe it or not, all of our woodwork is intact, 90% of it with the original finish, and none of it is painted. So today we're making crown molding because our house did not come with crown molding. Although it would have been an option if you were a slightly higher income family, this house would have been built for a higher middle income family, which would have been probably management within a company, foreman. We know at one time a bank owner owned it. So, and our house, we're striving to get it on the National and State Historic Registry. And we live here in Leavenworth, Kansas, so there's lots of historic buildings, and where we live at, buildings are preserved and not restored. So today we're making reproduction woodwork, and we're copying our original woodwork so that it looks nice. And a lot of our woodwork is really old. It had shellac, which yellowed and turned red with age, and also alligatored. So we're reproducing the alligatoring, we're reproducing the original color, which a lot of times the red was underneath the other color and really pretty. So today that's what we're reproducing, and it's taken me about 2 years to get the reproduction going. But this is an example of some of the woodwork we're trying to imitate, because this is a good representation of the color of our woodwork. And of course these go over doors. So this is what we're trying to reproduce, minus the glossy finish, which I think I may add that later, because some of ours actually is pretty glossy. So the mixture I use to imitate it is, I start with our woodwork, at least I start with Sonona red.
Sedona.
Thank you, camera person. Red, and I put a light coat of that on here, super light, because I want the red to come through underneath it. And then I stain it with dark walnut, and those are the two stains I use as a base stain. And then after that, this is a mixture of about a quarter cup of the red to about 4 cups of the dark walnut, and then I mix it with a stained poly mahogany, and then to water it down a little bit so it soaks through the other stain, I do about 2 tablespoons of mineral spirits. Then on my last coat, because I'm trying to get alligatoring, there's 2 separate ways that I do it. And the number one way I do it is, a lot of time alligatoring was raised up off the woodwork, and it was always darker than the existing woodwork. And so one of the ways I do that is I do a small amount of my mixture. Then I take sawdust, and I put the sawdust out on the table so I can pick out the big chunks, and then I mix my sawdust with the stain. Because the sawdust is such a small particle, it really mixes in with the stain and will end up being darker than the stain that I lay over this. And so it will look like regular alligatoring. Most of you that have alligatoring on your old woodwork will notice that the alligatoring and the raised warts are darker than the surrounding wood. And so since this absorbs more stain than the surrounding wood, it ends up being darker. Generally I let this soak until it becomes gummy, when the half polyurethane in the mixture starts to dry. Then once that happens, I put it out on my wood, and then I just kind of push it into the wood. And the point here is I want alligatoring. And what I've found is I can get it pretty good if I take the end of my stick, I was using the wrong end, and kind of cut it jagged. And this, I have found, is a great way to make alligatoring in your woodwork. And if you ever notice on your woodwork, the alligatoring is only in spots, generally. And I have no idea why. So anyway, this is how I get it. And I'll do it in spots. Then I knock it off. This is wet. This is what it looks like after it's dry. And the more you let it dry, the more it'll stay there. You have to let it dry completely. And fortunately, the mix I use with the polyurethane in it makes it dry really hard. And so when you go over it, it ends up staying. That's one way I do it. The other way I do it, of course, this is the red and the dark stain. This is my crown molding I made, because you can't find crown molding that looks like the existing molding in this house. So what I've done is I've used a 1x4, then another 1x4, cut it in half, and then I've cut multiple radiuses in it that that kind of look like our crown molding, or what crown molding would look like. Kind of matches our mop boards, baseboards, and trim around the doors. So I've had to make this by running it through the router, but anyway, this is my mixture that goes over it. And of course, through time, I've learned how to mix the mixture to match our existing woodwork. And if you can see, the red kind of shows through under it now, plus the red shows through in my varnish. And so I've been lucky that I have found just a precise mixture where from about 1 foot to 2 foot away, you cannot tell that this is not the woodwork. Then to kind of copy just the rough milling of the woodwork, what I've done is I fortunately my router bits are dull, and so it leaves kind of a rough surface on there. And then I sand it, and then experiment, sand it, experiment, until I get the finish I want. Fortunately, it ends up looking like small alligatoring when it comes through. But in a section, if I want a little bit more, I'll take a little bit of sawdust, sprinkle it on there, and then work it in. And that creates just great alligatoring. In our house, the woodwork is so old that it's almost all alligatored, and it's just gorgeous. It's so difficult to reproduce that, and when we have tours through our home, we want this woodwork to look 150 years old. We don't want it to be refinished so it looks new. When people come into the home, we don't want them coming into a home where it looks like a brand new 1870 home. We prefer it to look aged, like it's lived in. Multiple generations have lived here. The woodwork is rough, it's chipped. It tells a story when people walk into the house. And I'll show you an end relief of one of the pieces of molding that we make, so maybe you can see the profile just a little bit better. And I'll try to block it, but anyway, you can see the profile we ended up with. And of course, this is an end. These get 45 to match the other profiles. But I think that's it. The mixture of all this will vary on your specific woodwork, but if you're not refinishing your woodwork and you're trying to make your home look like it is actually 150 years old, this is a great way to do it. One thing I am going to end up doing with this woodwork to match the woodwork in the bedroom is I'm going to go over this with a gloss polyurethane, because this is just satin. I'll go over it with a gloss for my second coat. But anyway, this matches the woodwork in our house beautifully. And so that's how we do it, so it doesn't look like it's brand new. Thanks. The mixture I use for imitating the woodwork that's already in the house works really well. And also what I found is existing woodwork that is extremely scarred up, scuffed, discolored through 150, 200 years, however old your house is. I've learned that this mixture, a little bit modified, can work on restoring that woodwork. What I do is I put just a little more mineral spirits in it, and then I put a small amount of lacquer thinner in it. What the lacquer thinner does is it allows the mixture to penetrate the existing finish and kind of hang on to it, so it goes through years of soap or furniture polish or whatever. It allows it to penetrate and have a chemical bond, as well as kind of a physical bond to it. And once again, here's my mixture. And depending on what color your woodwork is, what color, the condition it's in, what it's had put over it previously, you can just alter your amounts. But the main ingredient I use is I start with a half a can of the stained poly. Someone asked why I use mineral spirits in it. About the consistency of milk is what I end up with. And that's because it allows the mixture to be somewhat transparent if you don't put a lot on it, but it allows it also, if you want to leave it for 5 or 10 seconds on top of the stain, it allows it to penetrate past and into the stain. And it also, when you're dealing with a lot of woodwork and you have to have your can open, you can add a little bit now and then. And because as you have your can open, the either the mineral spirits or whatever base it is evaporates out and the mixture ends up getting thicker. And this is kind of what some of the alligatoring looks like after it's somewhat dried. And you can also knock that down with sandpaper, knock it down with a piece of cloth before it dries and control how much is there. Also, this is still wet, so the alligatoring is coming across as shiny. And a coat of clear or flat or one put before the other or a mixture of the two can take your alligatoring down. And also another thing I do if I have sections of alligatoring that I'm imitating like that, if I want them down a little bit when it's still in the sticky stage, I'll just hit it like that. And it does a couple things. It can break up the particles, make the particles smaller. It can flatten the particles, and that is it. Here's some of the finished product, and you can see the alligatoring on it, and which does match our woodwork. There's some kind of without. I vary it back and forth. And there you can kind of see the relief that we ended up with. And these are 8-foot pieces of yellow pine. I use yellow pine because of the imperfections. The imperfections that are in the pine. And it turns out really nice. If you have any questions, let me know. In previous videos I've posted pictures of existing woodwork that we've touched up, as well as this woodwork with side-by-side comparisons of our existing woodwork. Thanks. Some of the woodwork in our house that that I'm reproducing, and the other downstairs will actually be smoother like this because I'll go over it with a gloss. And as you can see, some of the alligatoring on here is just gorgeous, and I've come close to reproducing it from a distance. Maybe this far you can't tell the difference, but this is all over our house, and it is gorgeous. Ironically enough, it's next to paneling because our Our back maid's staircase has been paneled, which that's way down the road to redo that. But anyway, a lot of our woodwork in this house still looks like this, and this is what we're reproducing. And if I go in the maid's room, which is my wife's sewing room now, this is some of the reproduced woodwork that I've done on the left, and then this is some of the original woodwork on the right. So get it pretty close, and it looks fairly well. This woodwork has been refinished at a super early date, but has darkened pretty well. Not as dark as that other, but it's different throughout the house because some has been refinished at one date or another, and some has never been refinished. So we're trying to get it all to match, just to look like it's all 1870, 1860, whatever. As an example, in our house, some of the woodwork, very little of it had been stripped and refinished, which I applaud people for doing that. That's awesome. If you're trying to make your house look like a new house. For us, we're just wanting to leave our house looking like an old house. So you can see here where this has been stripped, but I haven't gone over it to antique it back to the original. But next to it is a door frame that has alligatored, and this is original woodwork. So you can see the contrast between the two woodworks, and how one is definitely a lighter color than the other. And so I'll take you to a place where the door has been antiqued to match the original woodwork. So this door, just like the door downstairs, had been stripped and was 10 or so shades lighter than the original woodwork. So here you can see the original woodwork, and now you can see the door that the mixture has been put on with a little bit of alligatoring put on it. I flattened the alligatoring on this out pretty well because I wanted it to match the alligatoring on the woodwork. And as you can see, our woodwork is beautiful, and the mixture has really brought it back to life. This, I did sections of clear. I mixed some clear with some satin to mimic the original woodwork. Up here, as you can see, parts are kind of satiny, parts have kind of flattened out. And so anyway, these doors turned out great. This room is in the middle of being painted. The woodwork is done. The radiator's done. So that is where we've matched the door with the original woodwork. So here's a few pieces of the finished crown molding. I put after it got tacky, there's one piece, the middle wasn't any good, so I didn't stain it. But after it got tacky, I went ahead and put the clear on it. If you put the clear on it and you're getting the color on your brush, you need to let it dry a little longer. The point of polyurethaning over the flat with gloss when it's tacky is you get a chemical and a physical bond. If you're wanting to smooth it out more and sand it, or smooth it out more, then you have to wait for it to completely dry. Sand it, blow it off, then put your clear on, or another coat, or whatever. But that's it. Crown molding will be dry by tomorrow, and we'll put it up in the bedroom. Liquid nails and brad it to hold it.